For our next guest, he's an experienced CEO with extensive expertise in the energy sector across geothermal, wind, solar, hydro, and wave fuel categories. He sees a real potential for innovation in the geothermal sector as part of a low-carbon future. He's a registered engineer, an Oxford postgraduate, and last but not least, he's a dedicated surfer in his spare time. He's the reason why New Zealand is up watching a seminar at 4 a.m. just now. So please let me welcome Mr. John Worth, the CEO of Geo40.
Thank you, Alex. That's very kind, Alex. Thank you for your words. It's very nice to be joining you all here today. And look, we do like our surf down here in New Zealand, but we are still in some kind of lockdown, so we're not allowed to get haircuts, which is why my hair looks like it does. I'll get straight into a little introduction to Geo40, what we do, and we explain it in two lines. Sustainable future minerals, that's what we recover from geothermal fluid, and in doing so we bring about some geothermal ecosystem innovation, and I'll do my best to try and explain over the next few minutes exactly what we mean by that. 40 has been around for about 8 years now. This is paintings. Pictures once called the eighth world. It's what's known as the pink and white terraces. It was destroyed by an eruption in 1886, and effectively that is the phenomenon of geothermal fluid cascading down a hillside and depositing silica as it does so. And that is effectively the process that we set out to develop in a mechanical way. So on the right-hand side, that is what silica scaling looks like in a geothermal reinjection well. And so we talk about silica as both, I guess, an opportunity and a problem. We, as a company, I guess we are a collection of interesting disciplines. We're engineers, chemists, scientists, metallurgists, geologists, process engineers. And what we've been good at doing is developing processes and progressively scaling them up. So our journey always starts off in the laboratory, where we are targeting a specific mineral in geothermal fluid. And Geo40 actually set out to target the highest value minerals in geothermal fluid almost a decade ago. So way back then, we were looking for lithium, cesium, and antimony. And what we realized, like many people in the geothermal sector, is that there was one mineral in geothermal fluid which is ubiquitous, meaning it's always present and it almost always causes problems. And that's silica. So this is where we first, I guess, deployed our scaling up process, and you'll hear the word scaling a lot today. But effectively, this is the name. And then that up by about a factor of 10 till you've got what like a very large tree. From there, we tend to build a plant. Sitting on the left is our silica pilot plant, and actually built two of them. We built one that did some work in Japan, and another one in New Zealand. And that let us trial our technology on half a dozen or more geothermal fields to prove that our technology worked. From there, that gave us the confidence to scale up by a factor of about 10 to what we call a demonstration plant scale. And that demonstration plant is at the Ohaki geothermal field in the central North Island of New Zealand. We've been running that plant for almost 4 years, very successfully. And that was a very important asset for us because it enabled us to start selling high-quality colloidal silica offshore. And remember that nobody had ever recovered colloidal silica out of geothermal fluid and actually tried to make a saleable product from it. And that gave us confidence to go up about 10 times bigger again to what we call a full-scale plant. And so that is the one in the bottom right-hand corner. I'll show you that in a moment. And that plant is processing almost 7 million litres of geothermal fluid a day. So we talk about Geo40's DNA as being this sort of scale-up approach. It's how we manage technical risk and very relevant in the geothermal world where, as you all know, there are no shortage of surprises. when we talk about innovating in the geothermal ecosystem, we tend to set up immediately after primary power generation. So this little schematic says fluids coming up out of the ground, maybe at 300 degrees, and a bunch of that heat is being converted into electricity. What's limiting the amount of electricity that gets generated, or the amount of heat that's converted to megawatts or megawatt hours, is of course the need to keep the reinjection temperature quite high to keep the silica in solution. We tend to set up our silica recovery plant immediately after the power station. We only take a few degrees of heat out of the fluid, so we preserve most of the heat, and then that opens up two opportunities. We drop the silica concentration down to a relatively low level, and that makes that extra heat available. That creates two opportunities. One, of course, is the use of that heat for industry or district heating, or, of course, the generation of additional power through a bottoming cycle plant, an organic Rankine cycle plant. Post generation of additional electricity or district heating, we then move again and will seek to recover other minerals from that fluid. And there's a range of minerals where we've either developed processes or have technology. So we have a process developed for boron. We're working on cesium, stibnite or antimony. And one of the things that I guess is most exciting about the geothermal ecosystem, and particularly for anybody who's made a commitment to the Paris Accord, is the opportunity to sequester geothermal CO2 emissions. And we talk in this manner about there really being two key precursors to CO2 sequestration. One is a reduced silica concentration to enable the silica to dissolve CO2 to dissolve in the fluid. And the second, of course, is a reduced reinjection temperature, ideally as low as possible. Of course, you can only do that if you've taken the silica out of the geothermal fluid. The obvious question: why isn't everybody doing this? And we hear lots of reasons, and some of them sound like excuses, but some of them reflect the complex nature of the geothermal environment. Right? Conceptually, this sounds complex, right? And I guess we've worked hard to make it much less complex for generators. Generation companies tend to be large, and that means they've got internal processes to get through. We're seeing countries just start to understand what their Paris obligations will mean, what the size of their carbon dioxide checks will be associated with geothermal generation. Not everywhere you've got space to put a mineral recovery plant. And I think the most important, and it'll come up again and again today, is that probably the most important criteria for chasing minerals in geothermal fluid or for removing silica to enable CO2 sequestration is really that concept of motivation, right? And that's the number one thing we look for in a partner, is that genuine motivation to find new value. And essentially we look for those that wish to lead, not follow. And then I've just dropped in there as a little reminder on the right-hand side there, a certain element called lithium. And it's interesting. We've been working on lithium now for several years. We've invested a lot of money in lithium recovery. Earlier in the year, we filed 3 new patents, and we have a process route, a test rig. We're out of the lab, and by early next year, we will be trialing a wide range of global brines in terms of lithium recovery. And we've already done this work with Cornish Lithium, looking at their resources in the UK, and looking at brines out of South America and brines out of New Zealand. And we believe we have a pretty compelling technology to offer alongside silica and other minerals. I think one of the things we love about these conversations is, as it's been well put already today, is the opportunity for the different actors to come together and show how this can be done. And I've listed here, it's another classic ecosystem. I've listed here some of the essential actors. Taking silica out, of course, is important to give rise to these other opportunities. That's a service we can offer. Heat recovery generation is becoming very, very compelling. The idea of adding additional additional generation in a incremental way with a Climon plant or other ORC plants without any further investment in the steam field. Of course, is very compelling. It's a way of new generation without the resource risk. I think the role that the baseload is playing in the sector here is very powerful for those utilities that perhaps don't wish to do it themselves, that look perhaps for a hands-off approach where baseload can step in as an operator and funder. And we're seeing some other important actors in the space, including people like GNS, New Zealand's own geothermal science powerhouse, who have developed real expertise in things like CO2 sequestration, fluid rock interaction studies. So I think the message here I wanted to leave you with is that the extent to which we succeed in this geothermal decade will be all about our ability to collaborate and work together. I think we have all the pieces assembled across the sector, but of course the job is to actually bring those together and do this important work. And I think, just to close, I think what's exciting is that certainly we're starting to prove that we can do it. And the image on your screen is what we call our northern plant. This was the large-scale plant I mentioned in my opening slide. And we commissioned this in February this year. And this is a world first. This is the first plant in the world that pulls colloidal silica sustainably out of geothermal fluid. And this is a product we're now selling as far afield as Europe, Japan, United States, Mexico, across Asia, Australia. And this competes better than any other colloidal silica made by melting quartz sand. And we have a carbon footprint of that product that's tiny. So it's starting to find real favour in the market. Just looking forward over the next 12 to 18 months, I'd like to actually do the same thing on further sites, new sites, but we'll also like to be doing it in lithium recovery as well. And that's really all I wanted to say about Geo40. Thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I'll look forward to some dialogue.